fights with passion, and he inspires.
Are you ready for a war?
All right, welcome back to From 8 Arbitration, and got the midweek edition. I spoke with Mr. James Brennan. He's with the Rural Carrier Craft, and they're trying to put together a ticket to overthrow the current regime, kind of like we are with the CLC. And he's been trying to get on for a while. We've just not been able to make it work, but finally was able to make it work tonight. And so he's talking to the rural carriers, the ones that listen to this podcast, which are quite a few, and also wanting to talk to y'all, city letter carriers, and telling his story, where they're coming from, how discouraged they are with their union, like we are with ours. And so I told him, hey, man, we'll make it happen. Say what you got to say. We talked a little bit together, asked him a few questions about the rural carrier craft that I just didn't know. Both my parents retired as rural carriers, and I was a rural carrier back in the late 80s. I was an RCR, rural carrier relief. I would come in and do a collection route Monday through Friday, and then on Saturday I did Route 7 out of Franklin. It was J.C. Fox's route, and it was 96 miles long. I remember that. It was all country, very few stops, but it was 96 miles long. And I'd drive my dad's station wagon because he was off on Saturdays. And so you'd be sitting on the right-hand side doing the gas and brake with your left foot, driving with your left arm, and just that's how you was delivering. And so I remember it well. And so talked with Mr. Brennan, and so I'm just going to play that for you. We did it on Zoom, recorded off of that, and a very smart individual, and they're upset with their union like we are. So here it is, Mr. James Brennan, going to talk to y'all about the ticket that they're putting together and all the issues they're having with their union, kind of like we are with ours, all right? So y'all enjoy. Mr. Brennan. All right, I've got Mr. James Brennan. He's a rural carrier, and he's running for Director of Steward Operations. Now, we've been talking back and forth for quite some time. Matter of fact, I was on their podcast not too long ago, and kind of the same mindset. They are very frustrated with their union right now and the lack of leadership. And he wanted to come on, talk about the similarities kind of between the CLC and those that are running against the incumbent and their side. We're going to talk a little bit about his history, where they are at as far as their union, and the things that they're trying to get changed. And it's kind of mirrored kind of what I've been doing on From 8 Arbitration. And it's completely frustrating, the lack of leadership we have, and they're in the same boat. And I told him, no disrespect or slight to them, but the rural carrier union has always been kind of a joke to the city carrier union. And I've always thought that the city carrier union should swallow them up and just combine unions and give them, the representation they needed. Of course, now, hell, we're in the same boat. we've got piss poor representation from our leadership, so maybe that's not a good idea. But anyway, I'm going to get off of here and let him speak. I've got a few questions I'll ask him, but James, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, my brother. I'm gonna shut up and I'm gonna let you talk and just tell everybody out there kind of what's going on with the Rural Care Union and who you are and what you are trying to accomplish. All right.
All right.
All right. It's all yours, brother.
First off, I want to say I appreciate you letting me on. I know we've been talking a lot, and we do listen on the rural side too from 8 Arbitration all the time. I listen to every episode you've come out with so far, and there's a lot of similarities in the rural craft to the city craft of what's going on. I grew up in Lansing, Michigan. It is a GM town, one of the big three. Oldsmobile was started there, and so on. It's been a union town. My mom worked at Michigan State University. She was part of the clerical technical union. I actually walked the picket line with her when they were striking at one point. And I've been a union family pretty much my whole life. And I joined the Postal Service because the neighbor across the street from my parents was a rural carrier, and she actually had one of those right-hand drive Jeep Grand Cherokees that she used. And she used to pick me up from school every now and then with that. And I'd be sitting in the driver's seat and people be staring at me and from the window thinking this little kid's driving this car down the road. So it was a lot of fun. But when I joined the Postal Service back in 2017, I was looking for more home time, a stable job, someplace I could settle down, put my hat down. And it started out that way. I started out as a RCA and worked for 3.5 years as an RCA before I became a regular carrier. Well, as an RCA, I wasn't making enough hours, so I also had joined on through the local fire department and was doing that as well. And I did that for 5 years. And about a year and a half into being a full-time regular carrier, it was starting to take a toll on my body working full-time at the post office and then 36 hours on the weekend at the fire department. So I chose the career of the post office over that. And about that time, it started seeing signs that issues were arising in the office. Management, as the unicorn that they are, have pretty good management, was starting to get directives shot down to them from district management. And I started having to fight things in my office. And I stepped up to be the local steward in my office. And I did that until I got decertified by my union. Now, mind you, I was an elected steward and I got decertified by the national office. And that's when I started fighting as hard as I could for the craft on social media. I'm in a lot of the rural carrier groups. I'm in a lot of the joint groups with people. I'm on Discord and trying to help as many carriers as I can. And that's developed into helping more carriers than I ever could have as a local steward. And I am very appreciative to all the people that have helped me along the way. But last year at National Convention, I was sitting on the floor and people were asking me to run for a position on national office. And Bill May, my friend, stepped up to go against Don Maston the first year here last year that Don Maston was running for president. And then it went to the vice president and nobody stepped up. Then it went to the secretary treasurer. Nobody stepped up. Then it went to the director of labor relations. Nobody stepped up. And I said, I've had it. Somebody has to go up and challenge these people. And so I stepped up there and with absolutely no written speech or anything, I gave as long of an impassioned speech of why I wanted to run. And the biggest thing was I wanted to protect carriers. And that is the biggest problem we have in this post office is carriers aren't protected. We have carriers that are being harassed Monday through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They're being harassed on their scanners. They're being harassed on stationary events. They're being harassed on their RRECS inputs. So not only do we have those stationary events, but they're also tracking every single one of those scanner inputs that we do and then harassing carriers if they get a red flag in those inputs. And enough is enough. Our stewards are told from our district reps and our assistant district reps from national office that they can't file a grievance on behalf of carriers. They have to have the carrier file it for them first. The carrier has to file the grievance. They can't do like the city craft and just file a grievance if something's wrong. And I think that's a load of crock. The stewards should be able to protect carriers. Carriers should be able to protect carriers. And our national leadership has turned a blind eye to it. They've turned around and they've told us that selling for language is the best we're going to get. Give them a slap on the wrist, tell them don't do it again. And just like you said before, settle for will comply, shall comply, must comply versus cease and desist. It's the same on the rural side. You were talking about the 1 hour office times. And not too long ago, my supervisor came up and the new directive was everybody needed to be out of the office by 10 o'clock. I turned around and I got on the horn with my ADR and I talked with her about it. And while I was on the phone with him, the supervisor came out with the M38 showing that we should be out within so much time of the time listed on our thing. And I said, we're evaluated. That is if we have the same amount of mail that we were evaluated on. Sometimes we'll be later, sometimes we'll be earlier, but you can't tell us that we're going to be out of the office in 2 hours. That's not going to happen. And so he kept pressing the issue. I grieved it and they settled it for language. So it's high time that we have people stepping up that will actually defend this craft. Won't tell them, I'll get back to you, and never do. Stuff like that. Because our craft is the union. The people are the union, not the people at the top that haven't touched their route in 17, 25, 30 years. And it's gotten so much that our craft needs people that want to step up and want to protect the craft and want to enforce the contract and fight for the carriers. And that's why I chose to run for Director of Steward Operations both last year and this year, because we're just fed up with it.
All right. So y'all have a ticket. Do y'all have a full ticket that y'all going to present?
As it stands right now, we have Bill May for president, Kristen Wakeman for vice president, myself for Director of Steward Operations, and Jake Edel for 4-year executive committeeman.
All right. And what are y'all called? Do y'all have a name like the CLC, Concerned Letter Carriers? What are y'all called again?
We're just the United We Stand podcast.
Okay.
We don't have like a ticket that we're running on, because you guys have to go in and nominate yourselves at this year's convention, and then you guys vote for next year's convention, right?
Well, in 2 years in LA, we'll vote for we'll nominate, who we're going to vote for.
Okay. I know you guys have longer terms than we do. Ours are 1 year for the resident national officers, and then it's a 4-year executive rolling committeeman.
I got you.
Yeah.
So y'all are management is on y'all about stationary events as well?
Yes. In fact, my supervisor came up to me twice about it. And the first time I said, show me where. And he's like, here, that's a reload point. Here, that's a reload point. Here, that's a reload point. Along my route, I have spots where I stop, park the truck in the shade, and then reload my truck. So not only do I get my cooling break, but I'm still working. And
Right.
the second time he came to me, it was the exact same spots. And I turned around and said, you do this again, I'm going to need a PS form 8191, which is the rural carrier grievance form, because I would grieve it for harassment. He hasn't come to me since.
All right. And so the M38 is what? Ours, we have the M39, which is management's handbook, and we have the M41, which is the city carrier handbook. What is the M38?
So the M38 is the management of the rural carriers. And then we have the PO 603, which is the rural carriers' duties and responsibilities.
Okay. Now, y'all have evaluated routes, correct?
That's correct.
And what does that mean?
So what it means is, it used to mean we would get a mail count at least once a year, where they would actually come in and physically count the mail that we got for 2 weeks. And then based off of that, with a formula that they had, they would calculate how much we would get paid for a salary for the year. When we switched over to RRECS, we went into a rural route evaluated compensation system. They did away with the mail count system and replaced it with a 2-week, what they call mini mail survey. They come in and just count the things that aren't counted on automation, whether it be the bundled flats, the DPS, or the parcels that we get. So they would count the raw mail, the raw flats, and things like that during our 2-week mini mail survey. And then it goes into a computer system. It takes them 4 to 6 weeks now to figure out what we get, versus the old mail count, where you would actually know how much you would actually be getting before the mail count was over. So it's a little more hair raising. It's a lot more volatile.
Yeah.
It's dependent wholly on carrier inputs, especially, and computer systems working properly.
Yeah.
So
I remember maybe a year or so ago, y'all got completely screwed over. And a lot of people were blaming the union about it, about y'all's route evaluation process and how y'all just got just raked down.
Oh, we got
What was
hosed.
that? What was that about?
So when Rex came out, it was actually an arbitration decision under current executive committeeman Jeanette Dwyer's presidency. And when that happened, the Postal Service and the union had to work together, hire three engineers. The union hired one, the Postal Service hired one, and then those two engineers agreed on a third engineer to build this system. And it took them over a decade to actually figure out this system, and then they decided to roll it out. The union, wanting transparency at the time, was fighting the Postal Service to roll it out, and then rolled over and let them put it out. And when it came out, management was supposed to train the carriers on the REC system. Management didn't train them. District management didn't train. Regional management didn't train. The union answer to that was, well, we put it on the website. There are carriers that cannot access that website or any of the REC stuff because they're non-dues paying carriers. And some of them, yes, they chose to pull their dues because of the way they've been treated in the union. Some of them don't pay dues because they can't afford that hit to their paycheck every 2 weeks. But when it comes to the compensation of carriers, that's information that everybody should have been trained on. And what's funny is at our Mid-States 2023, we had the regional rep for the area in there. And I asked him point blank, why didn't you train everybody? And he said some attend the trainings, some turn it on and do other things, and some choose not to attend it. And I asked him why he didn't make it mandatory, and he had no answer. He was actually asked about it again this year at Mid-States in training for the route cuts that they were doing now that they've settled the REC system from its volatility. But he still had no answer to training them on the route cuts either. So there's a lack of training all through the system for management, which results in a lack of training for carriers. And the union wasn't willing to step up and actually do the training either. So in that process, 66% of rural carriers took a pay cut because of the new route evaluation system. And of those 66, some of them went from 5 days a week to 6 days a week. And I talked to a couple, two rural carriers, who in their household lost $36,000.
God dang.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Plus they lost
unbelievable.
their days off.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And
I've been a mad son of a bitch.
our president's response to that, the very first response from Don Maston as president, rural carriers have had it too good for too long.
Oh, see, now that sounds like my dumbass president, pound of flesh type comments. I don't know what happens to these people that get in that position, that they just get stupid as hell. But hell, here we are. So you have evaluated routes. How do you make overtime?
For regular carriers, we have the 2080 and 2240 rules. If you go over 2080 hours working your standard evaluation system, it converts to overtime. And if you work over 2240 overall, that includes working your relief day or other things, then there's another calculation they have to do with Fair Labor Standards Act. But otherwise, they did put out an MOU to try and stave off the bleeding of routes not being covered, that says that regular carriers can volunteer to help on other routes. And part of that was they couldn't work other routes on their relief day other than their own, and they would get paid time and a half. RCAs, after 40 hours, they're on time and a half, whether they're evaluated or not.
Right.
But that MOU puts us right in line with city carriers getting pivots and things like that. And unfortunately, management is abusing that MOU and is forcing regular carriers to carry other routes and forcing them to carry other routes on their relief day in violation of the MOU. And I'm still waiting on the union to step up formally and step for it because it's happening in multiple offices across the country.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to tie all this stuff together because we have a big issue on our craft with them using CCAs to do rural carrier work. And that memo kind of makes sense why they would do that. And we're filing like crazy about them making CCAs do rural carrier work. Does y'all's union not care about that?
We do, but our biggest thing about it is somebody has to be harmed in that, and that person who's harmed has to file the grievance. If the person doesn't know that a CCA is running a route when they could and they're sitting at home
Yeah.
and nobody's telling them that, hey, there's a route available that you could have ran today, they could file a grievance for loss of a fair day's work
Yeah.
and win that grievance and actually get paid that evaluation for that route if they filed that grievance. You know, it's like us coming over onto your craft and you guys grieving for the loss of work on
Yeah.
your side.
Yeah, because we're going to raise hell if another craft comes over and starts doing our business. But to me, I wish, and maybe this is just ignorance, but the NALCA and y'all's union should have something in place to where if we're doing y'all's work, we can notify somebody and say, hey, they're using CCAs on this day on this station and did this route. And y'all may want to look into that because y'all don't have shop stewards in station, right?
We can have local elected stewards in the office. In fact, the union prefers that because the
Yeah.
local elected steward is paid by the postal service instead
Really?
of the union versus
Huh.
areas versus the ADRs and DRs, the assistant district reps and the district reps. And then we have regional reps for that above that, and then national reps. We have state boards, but they aren't state stewards. We don't have that kind of system anymore. We have the national steward system instead. So it kind of just goes from DRs up to regional to national.
Right. Because
But
I just wish there, like I said, I wish there was something in place that I don't know, y'all be notified that they're using our people. That way we could grieve it, y'all could grieve it, and start hitting them in the pocket. But I don't know. Maybe it's
I,
asking
I
too much.
always I always argue for us to hit in the pocketbook, and I believe that our assistant district reps and our district reps should be working with your locals and your districts too.
Yeah.
I think we should be collaborating on this because at this point, our unions all need to work together. The APWU, the mail handlers, the NALC and the NRLCA should all be working together to stop the managerial abuse in all these offices.
I
It's
agree. I
pathetic.
agree 100%. I agree 100% with that. I think you want management to stop. You got to open up that wallet and get your hands in there. And to me, that's the easiest way to make them stop. Do you know much about your arbitration process, about your grievances? Do y'all have a backlog of grievances? Are you aware of anything like that?
Oh yeah. Oh, we always do. I mean, I've seen step fours that have sat for 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God dang.
Hmm. You
That to
know, and
me, that's inexcusable. I mean, how is
yeah.
that possible?
Well, the excuse that I got at our state convention this year when they were actually talking about this process was they were waiting for people or like the witnesses or they were waiting for information or things like that. Like
Yeah.
I believe our step four should be like yours. You know, you hand it up to you and you look at it and you go, all right, we're either going to sit down and discuss this or we're going to go to arbitration. Take your pick.
Yeah.
It should be our steward should be trained at step one to put everything in that file that they can. At step two, there should be little additions to that file, if any. And then at
Mhm.
step three, it should be we're either discussing this or kicking it to step four. And it's the same as step four. It should be we're discussing it or kicking it to arbitration. but our leadership has an aversion to arbitration, and they have been quoted as saying that our arbitration record is somewhere around 28% win record.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Now talk to me
So,
about y'all steps, because y'all's is a little bit different than ours. We have informal, where we grieve that at the local level in the station. If that doesn't get resolved, we send that up to the formal step A, because to ours it's kind of flipped. You said most of your stuff goes in at the step one, and then very
mhm.
little at step two. Well, ours, unfortunately, and my union disagrees with me on this. When I go into informal, I want my case complete. I want everything humanly possible in my file, because that's where I request information. That's where I investigate the grievance. And so I want all my stuff at informal. Our
Mhm.
union disagrees with it. I know my business agent hates that idea. And I know that Renfro's the same way. They don't like that idea. They says that it gives management a heads up. Well, hell, it's a grievance is a grievance is a grievance. You know, I mean, if they're wrong, they're wrong. I don't give a damn if they got everything in informal or not. But then it goes up to formal. I've always said that's where our cases win or lose at formal, and that's when most of our stuff gets put in at formal. And then if it doesn't get resolved there, it goes to the DRT, and if it doesn't get resolved there, then it's arbitration. Now, how does y'all's work?
So it starts with a discussion with the supervisor where you can have the evidence there with you, like the contract or things like that. But if the discussion fails, then you file a step one grievance. And in that, you ask the question, like, did management violate such and such when they did this? And that's when you have the first step, which usually is the in-office discussion, which would be your uh, informal. And then step two goes to the district rep, which also goes to the district office of the Postal Service. Step three is the regional, which goes to the regional office for the Postal Service, where they have the discussion with labor there. And then step four goes up to national. And then at national, if step four fails, then it goes to arbitration. And then they can pre-arbit before the arbitration is fully finished.
Y'all's arbitration process is completely screwy to me. How talk to me about y'all's arbitration process?
Well, a lot of it's held up at step four because they don't want to go to arbitration. Arbitration is an expensive endeavor to do for any union as it is,
Oh yeah,
but they try to solve it at step four, settle it for language if they can, or some similar process with that, because they're so afraid of arbitration that they don't want to take anything in there. They don't want to go in there for contracts. They don't want to go in there for step fours if they don't have to, because they are so afraid of failure. They're afraid to actually fight for a victory. And as
yeah,
you said before, if you're not willing to fight to a loss, but only want to fight to win, you already lost the battle.
yeah, yeah. I don't get that mindset, brother. I just don't. To me, arbitration is the shit. That's where you get it on, and I love it. There's nothing like arbitration. I have never been scared of an arbitration yet, and we've got some flat out monsters that can go into arbitration, and our union is scared to death. I know it's talking about backlog of cases. I know that they had like 5,000 cases backlogged at B down at New Orleans. And so, and I think this is a ploy by labor. I think that they have got us right where they want us as far as backlogging these cases, because then they send in the special team to go in there and pre-arb these cases, and they pre-arb 2,400 cases for pennies on the dollar. And so the carriers get completely screwed over on these type of sessions. The only ones that are making out are the union and the postal service, because they're saving that all that money they would have spent going to arbitration. So to them, it's all about the money, and I've said that before. It's all about the money. To the union, it's not about the city letter carrier any longer. It's about that money. and that's their God. And that's when you're talking about that with y'all's union, you're scared to death to lose. It's a great expense. Man, when your union is scared to fight something because they may lose, we've already lost. I know a lot of these regions, people call me and say that their business agents don't want to send us because we just may lose. I don't give a damn what the case looks like. I want to get in there and fight with these bastards from management. That's just how I am. I love it. And I've taken many a case in there that I knew we were going to lose. There were shit cases, but I want to get in there and get it on. And you never know, you may win. But yeah, and when you say that, it reminded me of New Orleans because they got completely hosed by these pre-arb sessions. And like I said, 2,400 cases out the door, man, for pennies on the dollar. And the carriers are just, just like y'all getting screwed over by the union and labor. So it's good to hear that y'all have a movement of your own saying, hey, enough is enough, like you said, and we're needing to take this back over. The days of kicking ass are gone with my union, and it sounds about that way with y'all. And like I said, y'all's union has always kind of been the running joke, just been sorry as hell. And I hate to say that to you, but that's just the way it is. I would love nothing more than y'all get some ass kickers in there in y'all's leadership and change that narrative as far as y'all's union is concerned. And it sounds like you're on the right track. You and I have spoke often, and I love your passion for your people. Anybody that has that passion like that, that love for their carriers, like you do, I wish them nothing but the best. Y'all need to have those people in positions. A lot of times you see unions are just like in the movies. They're fat cats. They get in those positions, man, and they forget where they came from. It's all about that money, going out and partying and drinking and all this stuff and womenizing. And they forget about us down here on the floor. And I hate that. Is there anything else you want to say, my brother, before we cut this off?
Well, I've said this before to people. I said I want this union to be such a fighting union and standing up for its carrier so much that the city craft wants to be just like it. I
I
want them
like that.
fighting every day for every carrier. I want the rural union to be working with the city union. I want the stewards cross-trained between the two crafts to know what's going on for the city side as well as the rural side, so that both sides can step up together and say, no, that hurts the city craft and that hurts the rural craft. It's a violation of this. Let's go to war.
I like that. I like that a lot because at the end of the day, I've got one enemy. That's management. I don't need to be fighting against my union as well. And that's where we are in the NALC. Sounds like that's where you are. But we got one common enemy, and that's management, labor. Uh, they're the biggest waste ever. And I agree with you. I wish that our unions would at least talk to each other. And like I said, CCA is doing y'all's work. There needs to be some kind of line of communication to call and contact somebody and say, hey, I know for a fact, one of our CCAs is doing y'all's work. Somebody on y'all side need to get paid for sitting at home. And I would love to see that. You never know. Maybe that will happen somewhere down the way. We've got this ticket coming in. James Henry will be our president coming this next election. It's a foregone conclusion. I would love for him to be able to sit down with the guy that y'all are going to have as president and at least talk to each other, and say, hey, there's some common things that we're dealing with. Let's see how we can best communicate with each other and get each other on the same page as far as defeating this one common enemy, postal management. But my brother, you're welcome anytime. If it gets closer and you want to have more people come on here, you're more than welcome. Sorry it's taking so long, but I've been kind of busy. So
I've heard, and the biggest takeaway that I want anybody in either craft to know is that at least at the carrier level, for most of the carriers out there, we love our city brothers and sisters just as much as our city brothers and sisters love our rural brothers and sisters. And I want them to realize that no matter what, at the end of the day, we're all in this together.
that's right. That's right. Well, my man, I sure appreciate your time. Glad we could finally get this worked out. We've been trying to do this for a bit, but holler at me later, man. We'll get you back on here. All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, James. Take care, buddy.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.